Sri Aurobindo once said that when people are asked to surrender, the first thing that they surrender is their common sense. We are on this series of passages by the Mother in this compilation, The Great Adventure. And the passage that we did last week was on the subject of surrender. And the passages that we shall do today are also on the same subject, just underlines the importance of this subject, and also the importance of understanding what surrender truly is, as we mentioned last time. The word surrender is apparently a simple word, but it is so commonly misunderstood because it is so convenient to misunderstand it. The important things in relation to surrender are surrender to whom and surrender what. When it comes to surrender to whom, surrender does not imply surrender to evil. It does not imply surrender to unjust authority. It implies surrender to the divine. And surrender what? Surrender our will so that it progressively merges with the divine will and we are able to do what the divine expects of us. Surrender of the outcome of our efforts, because that outcome is not always in our own hands. In fact, it is never in our own hands. It's just that sometimes the outcome happens to coincide with what we expect and sometimes it does not. But even when it does not, it is because the divine willed otherwise, and even if there is no other purpose to that variation, to that discrepancy between what we expected and what actually happens, there is at least one positive feature which the outcome always has, and that is this outcome creates for us a set of conditions and circumstances which can serve as an opportunity for spiritual growth. So in that sense, it can serve us as a means to fulfillment of the ultimate purpose of life. So every outcome, irrespective of what it is like, offers a certain set of conditions and circumstances. And from there on, once again, if we hand over our life to the divine, then the divine knows how to take us towards our purpose in life, which means that itself then becomes the means of the fulfillment of the purpose of life. When we had that free choice available, if we had chosen otherwise, maybe the outcome would have been different. That is a common regret. If only I had done this. Yes, the outcome would have been different, but then those would have been the conditions, and we do not always know what those conditions would have been. And since we live in this sort of a state of more ignorance than knowledge, we have no choice but to either grudgingly accept whatever happens or to accept it happily as the divine will, and then see how in this new set of circumstances or conditions that have been created, how we can still move towards the purpose of life by just handing over our life now to the divine. It's something like, you see, the GPS in a car. It tells us which way to go. Goes 2 miles straight and then turn right and then go 3 miles and then turn left because it knows where we have to go. But then very often we do not pay heed to it because it says turn right, but then we find on the right there is a traffic jam. So instead of turning right, we decide to go straight. But then the GPS does not abandon us. It starts recalculating, depending upon where we are now, how we can go towards our goal. And in the same way, the divine does not really abandon us even when we don't pay heed to it. We create a new set of conditions by not paying heed to it. And then in those conditions, once again, if we are prepared to pay heed to the divine, once again get ready to merge our will with the divine will, it once again guides us. Yes, now I know where you are. From here, now this is what you should be doing to further move towards the purpose of life. So, broadly speaking, surrender implies an acknowledgement of the fact that we have very imperfect control, if at all, on our lives. And it is an acknowledgement of this fact that there is a greater power, a higher power, and a higher purpose in our lives, which is guiding us through an unseen hand. And because we live in a consciousness which has more ignorance than knowledge, we are often not aware of this unseen hand. With this little introduction, we go to today's passage. Surrender is the decision taken to hand over the responsibility of your life to the divine. Without this decision, nothing is at all possible. If you do not surrender, the yoga is entirely out of the question. Everything else comes naturally after it, for the whole process starts with surrender. You can surrender either through knowledge or through devotion. You may have a strong intuition that the divine alone is the truth and a luminous conviction that without the divine you cannot manage, or you may have a spontaneous feeling that this line is the only way of being happy, a strong psychic desire to belong exclusively to the divine. I do not belong to myself, you say, and give up the responsibility of your being to the truth. Then comes self-offering. Here I am, a creature of various qualities, good and bad, dark and enlightened. I offer myself as I am to you. Take me up with all my ups and downs, conflicting impulses and tendencies. Do whatever you like with me. We'll go over it now a little slower. Surrender is the decision taken to hand over the responsibility of your life to the divine. Without this decision, nothing is at all possible. If you do not surrender, the yoga is entirely out of the question. Now, last time we talked about surrendering the will, surrendering to the outcome of the results. And we saw that this is because surrender is a progressive process. It's not an all or none process. It's a gradual process. It's not an event which takes place all at once and then we are totally surrendered. Because surrender is not easy. True surrender is an extremely difficult process and therefore it's a prolonged process. And keeping with that, the Gita also develops this idea of surrender gradually. If you look at the most often quoted verse of the Gita, Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana, that is, we have a right on the action but not on the outcome of our actions, not on the fruit. It comes in the second chapter. And this asks us only to renounce our attachment to the fruit of the action. Now, this is on one hand just the beginning and therefore relatively easier to grasp. At the same time, it is not very easy to grasp if we start applying our mind, if we start using our intellect. Because if I do something, then why do I have not a right to the fruit of the action? And therefore, very soon, probably in the third chapter, we are told that it's only an ahankar vimud atma that feels that I am the doer of the action. So we are not the doers and therefore we do not have a right to the fruit of the action. So first we are told to renounce only the fruit and then we are told to renounce also the doership of the action. So it's a progressive process. And it is only by the 18th chapter that we are told to renounce everything, renounce our total being, what the mother is talking about here, hand over your entire life to the divine. That is something which we are told in the 18th chapter, Sarva dharmana parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. Give up all dharmas, give up all guidelines of what is right and wrong, just take refuge in me and you will have no reason to grieve. That is something that comes in the 18th chapter. So there is a progressive development of an argument from renouncing the fruit of the action to renouncing the doership and then renouncing everything. And therefore, the mother here, after that last week's passage, here is talking of a higher level of surrender, a more complete and perfect surrender, a surrender in which our entire life has been handed over to the divine. Now, this last verse that comes almost towards the end of the Gita, Sarva dharmana parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. Now, this again is a verse that can be easily misinterpreted. The Lord Himself has given us the permission to forget about all the codes of conduct, all the usual guidelines about what is right and wrong. That is what dharma means in the traditional sense, not a particular religion, but the sense of right and wrong, the rules for which are available to us in the Shastras, in various codes of conduct of various religious and spiritual traditions. give up all of them, forget about all of them, and just take refuge in me. So I can give up all of those, forget all those, and say that because I have taken refuge in the divine. But then this taking refuge in the divine is a total surrender, and that does not come easily. And therefore, this does not really have to be an excuse for a license to do whatever I feel like doing. It is also not an excuse for abdication of all responsibility, all moral responsibility, all duties. It is not an excuse for that either. That is something which should come after we have mastered whatever has gone on in the previous 17 chapters of the Gita. And if we look at that, we find that that goes through, again, a very progressive process. First, it is difficult to understand why I should give up the fruit. Then I am explained a bit, I should be ready to give up the fruit because I am not even the doer, so I should renounce the doership also. And then I am told that if I am not the doer, then who is the doer? Naturally, then that is the question. And is it easy to accept that I am not the doer when physically that is all I can see? And therefore, that requires knowledge, and that knowledge comes in the 9th, 10th, 11th, around those chapters of the Gita, the knowledge that all that we see in the world is a manifestation of the divine, and that whatever happens here is happening because of the divine will. All that knowledge comes, and when that knowledge comes, and that knowledge becomes not just theoretical knowledge, but that knowledge becomes real to Arjun because Krishna reveals to him his true form, his Virat Roop. So when he reveals to him that form, then that knowledge is no longer theoretical knowledge to Arjun. Now it is real. It has become a part of his experience. So it is only when it becomes a part of that experience that the person is ready for the true surrender, which comes in chapter 18. So when Lord Krishna tells him, give up all dharmas and just take refuge in me, in fact, Arjun has already accepted it, and probably a few verses before that, Arjun has said that I am ready to do whatever you tell me to do. Because now Arjun has not just that theoretical knowledge, he also has the realization that knowledge is real to him, and that realization has now inspired a sense of devotion. So the devotion of Arjun is a corollary to the knowledge and realization that he has got. He has seen the glory of God in its full splendor, and therefore this devotion is now a corollary to that knowledge. And that is why it is very easy for him to accept this, that yes, now I am ready to do whatever you tell me to do. And therefore when Krishna tells him sarva dharmana parityaji, that is something which appears very natural to him. He has already done it internally. So it's just Krishna is just giving an expression to what Arjuna is in any case decided to do. But then that is something which comes only after we have gone through that type of a realization, so that our surrender has become complete and total, the type of surrender that the mother is talking about, handing over our life to the divine. Before we go further, I'll just read out a prayer from the prayers and meditations of the mother, in which she has talked about the same thing, her true and total surrender to the divine. One must know how to give one's life and also one's death, give one's happiness and also one's suffering, to depend for everything and in all things upon the divine dispenser of all our possibilities of realization, who alone can and will decide whether we shall be happy or not, whether we shall live or not, whether we shall participate or not in the realization. In the integrality and absoluteness of this love, this self-giving, lies the essential condition for perfect peace, the indispensable foundation of constant beatitude. And this is 6th of May, 1927, when the mother wrote this. And in the historical context, it's a little easy to understand why the mother wrote this in 1927. Because the mother came for the second time, as we saw in Pondicherry, in 1920. And after that, she went into intense personal sadhana. She was more or less in solitude for about 6 years. In November 1926, 24th November 1926, came Sri Aurobindo's over-mental siddhi, after which he went into solitude for 24 years. So that happened in 1926. And then the ashram had gradually started growing, the more and more disciples had started coming, and the entire charge of taking care of the external work associated with the ashram was handed over to the mother, because Sri Aurobindo went into intense solitude. So this solitude which the mother had been enjoying for 6 years, during which she was going through this intense personal sadhana in solitude in Pondicherry, that was in a way interrupted. And as the mother once divulged to somebody, that this was an act of absolute surrender to Sri Aurobindo on her part. To interrupt that sadhana in solitude and take over the external work associated with the ashram and make that her sadhana. And therefore we can see here this sense of absolute surrender in this prayer which she wrote on 6th of May 1927. So she also surrendered completely. Now we go further with this passage. You can surrender either through knowledge or through devotion. You may have a strong intuition that the divine alone is the truth and a luminous conviction that without the divine you cannot manage. Now surrender can follow two routes, knowledge and devotion. And we have seen how both are possible. In case of Arjun, it was through the route of knowledge. The knowledge that everything in the universe is a manifestation of the divine, everything happens here through the divine will, and this was no longer theoretical knowledge, it was a realization. So it was a part of knowledge through experience, through direct experience, which is the best and most convincing type of knowledge that we can have. So for Arjun, this devotion was secondary to knowledge, and so one can go through this route of knowledge and arrive at devotion, which in fact is a prerequisite for total surrender. Because total surrender is not possible without devotion, and on the other hand, devotion is meaningless without total surrender. So the two are intimately related. However, it is not always through the route of knowledge that a person develops devotion. It is possible to develop a sense of devotion directly. And that is what many of the great bhaktas have done, and we have had so many of them in the Indian tradition. Guru Nanak, Sri Ramakrishna Paramhans, Surdas, Tulsidas, Mirabai. Now these were all people who were not, to start with, people with great bookish learning. They started with devotion straight away, realizing through some inner vision that the divine is all that there is in this world, and that is the only goal worth pursuing. And then they pursued this goal out of a sense of sheer devotion. And it was through this path of devotion that they acquired the knowledge of the divine through direct realization. So they did not go from knowledge to devotion, but they straightaway went from devotion to knowledge, and that devotion was total and therefore involved that total surrender. So one can start with knowledge or one can start with devotion, and that's what the mother is saying here, that surrender may come either through knowledge or through devotion, and the type of knowledge that will lead to devotion is the intuition that the divine alone is the truth and a luminous conviction that without the divine you cannot manage. So this is an acknowledgement of the imperfect control, of the inadequate knowledge, and the great incapacity that we have to guide our lives. So it's an acknowledgement of that incapacity because of the limitations that we have as human beings. So because the divine help we cannot manage, and that is how we decide on the basis of this knowledge of our inadequacies to surrender to that divine, to that higher power that is available to us. Or the other route is through devotion, or you may have a spontaneous feeling. Now feeling is a little different from knowledge. Feeling is at the level of the emotion. Devotion is also an emotion. And if we look at the constitution of a human being, we find that we have within our inner processes of, we may call the processes of the mind, as distinct from the body. We have a rational mind which acquires knowledge, so-called knowledge, But then we have both below and above this rational level a non-rational part of our being. The non-rational part of our being below the level of the knowledge is what we normally call the emotions, or that subjective part that pulls us towards whatever feels good. Now that is not only non-rational but also infra-rational, and therefore can sometimes lead us astray. However, apart from this, we also have another non-rational part of the being that is not infra-rational but supra-rational. So there is also that process, that psychic process within us, which is equally subjective, which does not require the crutch of reasoning, which guides us towards truth faster than reason, and that also is a non-rational process. And that part of the being is also characterized by feelings, because that is also subjective, that also has feelings. And that is what starting straight away with devotion means. And that is what the mother is saying, that we may start with devotion, which means that we may start with that spontaneous feeling, that feeling from that supra-rational part of our being. That part of our being starts with this feeling that this line is the only way of being happy. Because feelings pull us towards what feels good, but then the infra-rational part of our being pulls us towards the fleeting pleasures which will not last, which are only illusions, which give us a feeling of happiness which comes and goes, a happiness which is coupled with sorrow. It comes in pairs, it comes coupled. It's a part of the dualities of life. That is where that infra-rational part leads us. But the supra-rational part gives us this feeling that there is a way of being happy, that it will be sustainable, that it doesn't come coupled with sorrow, and that also is a non-rational part of the being. That is also subjective, that is also a feeling, but that is the feeling that inspires devotion to the divine, and creates in us a strong psychic desire, not a desire at the level of the emotions, the usual emotions for desire for a TV or a desire for a car, not that desire, but a psychic desire, which means coming from the supra-rational part of our being, creates a strong psychic desire to belong exclusively to the divine. So that is how devotion develops directly, and then that devotion can lead to knowledge. I do not belong to myself, you say, and give up the responsibility of your being to the truth. Then comes self-offering. Here I am, a creature of various qualities, good and bad, dark and enlightened. I offer myself as I am to you. Take me up with all my ups and downs, conflicting impulses and tendencies. Do whatever you like with me. So once we realize that yes, divine is the only goal worth pursuing, that is the only source of sustainable happiness, the type of happiness that surpasses ordinary happiness, and therefore we give it the names like joy, delight, and bliss. That is the source of that. We hand over our life to Him and hand over ourselves completely to Him, warts and all, as they say. Means whatever we are good and bad. Here I am, a creature of various qualities, good and bad, dark and enlightened. So we acknowledge that yes, I have both good and bad. I offer both to the divine. Why do we offer the bad also to the divine? Our mistakes, because we know that those mistakes, those evils, those weaknesses, also we cannot remove entirely on our own. They need to be rejected, they need to be transformed, they need to be transformed into their opposites. For example, pride has to be transformed into humility, falsehood has to be transformed into truth, but we know that our own efforts are not enough, our own will not be enough to bring about that type of a transmutation, that type of a transformation, and therefore we hand over that also to the divine for working out that transformation. Again, it's not abdication of responsibility, it's just an acknowledgement of our incapacity. We do our bit to earn the divine grace, and then the divine grace takes over. So here I am, a creature of various qualities, good and bad, dark and enlightened. I offer myself as I am to you. Take me up with all my ups and downs, conflicting impulses and tendencies. Do whatever you like with me. And that is what we had in the opening bhajan, when Amit said he's going to play a bhajan. Before Karna Didi came, I told him, play this one, Main Tera Ma, Main Tera Ma. So it's handing over completely to the mother. told him, play this one. I had some intentions of going to the next page also, and now the time is both ways. I can go and I can also wind up. Now the next page is also on the same theme of surrender. By surrender we mean a spontaneous self-giving, a giving of all yourself to the divine, to a greater consciousness of which you are a part. Surrender will not diminish but increase. It will not lessen or weaken or destroy your personality. It will fortify and aggrandize it. Now here the mother has addressed another common question which arises in relation to surrender. If I surrender myself, then what will be left of me? मैं तो खत्म हो गया, मेरा क्या रहा? Means I have completely lost my existence or my, entity. As an entity, I am finished. Now, why do we have to be so afraid of this happening when we surrender ourselves so often throughout life? We surrender, the child surrenders to the parents, to the teacher, the husband surrenders to the wife, and sometimes the other way around, and of course in healthy marriages, they both surrender to each other more or less alternately, and that keeps the balance, but whatever it is. So we surrender to the boss, and we surrender grudgingly also to whatever happens in life when we cannot help it. So life is full of so much of surrender. Then why is it that we are so afraid of surrender to the highest, to the greatest of the powers, and feel that my existence as a distinct entity will be completely finished if I surrender to the divine? What the mother is saying is that that is not going to diminish us in any way. It is in fact going to enlarge us. Because now we have aligned our will with the strongest of wills. We have aligned our knowledge with the greatest of knowledge. And therefore, we will have available to us that illumination, that light, which can take us from this extremely partial and limited knowledge that we have through the mental route to a knowledge which is much more complete, which will give us, which will enlarge this knowledge to take us to a new level of awareness, to a new level of consciousness. Because that light will now be available to us. Why are we afraid of losing our power? Because it will now align us with that much greater power which can overcome all obstacles, for which everything is possible. That is what happened to Draupadi when she was in trouble, and she aligned herself with that higher power, and the power responded by sending her that unlimited amount of cloth which no human being could have created. So it has that great capacity, that power, which can come from that source which exceeds all human power. I mean, you have seen the power that nature can create. Nature, although it is again a sort of a subordinate power of the divine, an executing power, but even that can exert so much power. You have seen pictures of what happened in Japan recently, how such solid-looking structures and heavy cars and everything, how they were being treated like small bits of straw. Nature has that capacity. We are aligning ourselves with that great power. We keep complaining of so many things in life, but all the same, still, why do we all want to go on living? It is primarily because the three aspects of the divine, the existence, consciousness, and delight, we have a bit of each of these three. And it is because of that basic sense of delight that we have that in spite of all the problems, in spite of all the challenges, in spite of all the difficulties, we still want to go on living. And the same way, that consciousness, the Satya Chitta Ananda, the consciousness, that consciousness has two aspects. One is awareness and the other is a will, a force. The Chitta also goes with the Chitta Shakti, not just the awareness but also the force. We have a bit of that, and that is what gives us that will and the force. And then if we align this with the absolute consciousness force, of which this is a very partial and limited manifestation, our own will is a very limited manifestation, then we acquire that great strength. That is the type of strength that comes when we take those unconventional decisions which come from the level of the psychic being. We have talked about the psychic being quite often, that the psychic being is that inner guide which guides us towards decisions which are based on love, universal love, decisions which are based on transcending the ego. when we take those decisions, we suddenly acquire a great deal of clarity. That clarity comes because now we have aligned ourselves with that absolute knowledge which has total knowledge, and therefore we get that courage, get that clarity without depending upon reason. We also acquire that courage required to take those decisions because now we have that strength. And the usual sense of fear and insecurity which makes it difficult for us to take those decisions, because that is the level of the mental at which all those questions and doubts are raised, which make it difficult for us to take those type of decisions. Those doubts vanish and they are replaced by that clarity, and we lose that sense of fear because now we have handed over the life to the divine. I mean, the type of decisions which I am talking about are the type of decisions, say a person took, just one example, a young boy, Krishnan, staying in Madurai a few months back, and this was doing the rounds in the emails. He had taken a very drastic decision. He had finished his course in hotel management or something, and then he had landed a very lucrative job in Switzerland. All the visa and everything was ready, the air ticket was ready, and just a week or so before he was to leave, he went to the temple in Madurai, and there he saw some hungry beggars, and he decided that what is the point in going to Switzerland and feeding rich people in 5-star hotels? I can cook so well, why not feed these hungry people? And he decided not to go to Switzerland, and instead he formed an NGO which today feeds a few hundred people in Madurai, a few hundred destitutes. Now, this is an extremely difficult decision at a mental level to take. So many questions and doubts would naturally arise. Everybody around, including his parents, might have told him, you are doing something very foolish. पहले जाओ कुछ पैसा वैसा कमा के आओ, फिर जितनी सेवा करना है कर लेना. That would be the usual response. But then he suddenly acquired the courage to face the whole world, his parents and everybody else. He suddenly acquired the courage to be called foolish and still tolerate and still do what he had to do, because somewhere deep within he knew he was doing the right thing, because he had that great clarity. And he also had that courage which comes from the divine. So that power was with him, and therefore he acquired that power, that great strength to be able to take such an apparently foolish decision. So that is how. And then the type of doubts and questions. ठीक है, अभी तो ये कर रहा हूँ, बट 10 साल के बाद क्या होगा, 20 साल के बाद क्या होगा, मेरी शादी होगी कि नहीं होगी, मैं सेटल कभी हो पाऊँगा कि नहीं हो पाऊँगा, बूढ़ा हो जाऊँगा, कुछ नहीं कर पाऊँगा, फिर मेरे को कौन देखेगा? He didn't think of any of these things. Now all these are doubts and questions which will come at the mental level. Now all of them disappears when you hand over the life to the divine. If the divine has shown me this path and I have decided to do it, he'll find some ways of taking care of all those things, uncertainties and insecurities. So all that fear and insecurity also disappears. Now, that is what the mother is talking about here, that it doesn't diminish us, it enlarges us. It takes away from us all those fears, all those weaknesses which may be ordinarily associated with us, and therefore it is not, this surrender does not really weaken us, it does not destroy us as an individual, it only fortifies us, strengthens us. Surrender means a free, total giving with all the delight of the giving. There is no sense of sacrifice in it. If you have the slightest feeling that you are making a sacrifice, then it is no longer surrender, for it means that you reserve yourself or that you are trying to give with grudging or with pain and effort and have not the joy of the gift. Perhaps not even the feeling that you are giving. When you do anything with the sense of a compression of your being, be sure that you are doing it in the wrong way. So here the mother is saying that not only surrender is important, surrender in the right spirit is important, surrender with the right motive is also important, because if we surrender with the idea that I am doing it because I have no other choice, I have to reconcile to whatever has happened because I cannot help it, then it is not true surrender. So it has to be a happy and willing surrender, because it is surrender not just to the divine will, it is surrender also to the divine wisdom. Surrender to the divine will would mean, well, the divine will is much stronger than mine, He is a powerful dictator. He can do whatever he likes, so I have no choice but to reconcile to whatever he has done. That would be one type of surrender. Now that would be just surrender to the divine will. But we are surrendering not just to the divine will, a true surrender is also to the divine wisdom. Which means that if that all-powerful divine, which has such a strong will, doesn't just have that strong will but also has supreme wisdom, then whatever it has done, whatever it expects of me, whatever it expects of me in life, whatever guidance it is giving me through the psychic being, that has behind it that profound wisdom which far surpasses my capacity to think at a mental level. And therefore, when I surrender myself to also the divine wisdom, then I do it happily. I do it happily because I have available guidance which far surpasses my own capacity to think. And that is why I handed over my capacity, my freedom to make a choice, handed over the effort, handed over the outcome of the effort, handed over everything to the Supreme, because it not only has a very powerful will, it also has supreme wisdom. So when we surrender both to the will and the wisdom of the divine, it is a happy and willing surrender and not a grudging reconciliation to something which we cannot help. So the motive behind the surrender, the spirit of the surrender, is also important. Here I'll just give you a little bit, as I mentioned the Christian tradition, a little bit from the book of the Psalms.
Book of?
Psalms, Psalm. Yes. It's a difficult word to pronounce. Both the P and the L, they become more or less silent. I love thee, O Lord, my strength. So the Lord is our strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. Now when it says I am saved from my enemies, it is not necessarily physical enemies, because we have the greatest of enemies, in fact, within us. We usually, in our tradition, count them as Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Matsarya, and so on. Those are our enemies. And to overcome those enemies, also it is the divine that we need. And that is why I hand over everything myself, my strengths and my weaknesses, my bright and my dark parts, everything to the divine. Because he is my strength, he is the one whose strength I need to fight all these enemies. Now this paragraph is about to end now. True surrender enlarges you, it increases your capacity, it gives you a greater measure in quality and in quantity which you could not have had by yourself. So true surrender amplifies our strength, it increases our capacity, it does not diminish us in any way. And before we finish again, one more prayer from Prayers and Meditations. O my beloved Lord, how sweet it is to think that it is for Thee and Thee alone that I act. It is at Thy service that I am. It is Thou who dost decide and ordain and set in motion, guide and accomplish the action. What peace, what tranquility, what supreme delight come with the feeling and perception of this. For it is enough to be docile, plastic, surrendered, attentive, in order to let Thee act freely. No longer then are any errors or faults, any lack or insufficiency possible, for what Thou hast willed, Thou doest, and Thou doest it even as Thou hast willed it. Accept the ardent flame of my gratitude and my joyous and fully confident adherence. My Father has smiled and taken me in His powerful arms. What could I fear? I have melted into Him, and it is He who acts and lives in this body, which He Himself has formed for His manifestation. So that is what we get through that total surrender, a sense of strength, a sense of delight, a total fearlessness, a sense of total security. Yes, in a way, everything is divine grace. The effort that we make is also a part of divine grace. And therefore, the mother said that what comes first, whether effort comes first or grace comes first, is a difficult question. It's a moot point, something like the chicken and the egg story, which comes first. Because, yes, in terms of common sense, what appeals to us is that, yes, if I make the effort, then only I acquire the right to earn the divine grace. Because of my efforts, all what I will get is only what is proportional to my efforts. Something like, a prize. If I do a very good job, I get a prize. If I do a better job, I get a better prize. जैसे स्कूल में होता है ना, first prize, second prize, third prize. So the prize is related to the effort. But there is also something which is not a prize but a gift. Grace is like the gift. It is disproportionate. It is far out of proportion to the effort. जैसे मम्मी पापा गिफ्ट देते हैं बर्थडे पे, तो that is not related to how good a boy you have been throughout the year. वो तो नहीं सोच के देते ना. So that is a gift. So grace is like gift. So we say that we put in the effort, and then the divine, out of its immense love, gives us something far out, which is far out of proportion. That is grace. But then the effort that we make is also a part of the grace, because how is it that we choose to make the effort which earns us the grace? The fact that we were brought into this world, given a human birth, given those abilities and circumstances which made that effort possible, some thoughts which were put in our mind to make that effort possible, that is also a part of divine grace. See, so many people pass by this ashram, they know what happens in this ashram, so few come in. Now, those who make this effort of coming in, and somehow this thought enters their mind, let us go and see what is going on, that also is divine grace. So that effort also is a part of divine grace. No, it's very, I think it's a very important point, because to receive grace, we have to prepare ourselves. So as we get prepared, we become more and more fit for receiving a higher order of grace. And the question is, do we earn the grace also because of our past karmas? Yes, our tradition does believe in rebirth, and every soul is on an extremely long journey which continues from life to life. And the fact that the soul acquires a human birth, and then after that human birth, with each birth, if the life has been properly utilized, the person progresses further and is born at a higher level of spiritual evolution, is because of the homework that has been done in the previous lives. That is true. How is faith different from surrender? That's a good question. Both are in fact very closely related, because just as surrender is not possible without devotion, surrender is also not possible without faith. They are closely related, because it's only with faith that one will be able to hand over the life completely and then say that whatever I could think I have thought, but then that is no meaning. Ultimately, he can think much better. And therefore, I let things happen his way and in his time. So that sort of surrender comes only when one has that faith, trust, and devotion. Yes, why in India, all over the world has produced spiritual masters from time to time. But just as, you need a guru, the guru also needs you, and that's how you are brought in contact with a particular guru. And the important thing is not which guru you are brought in contact with. The important thing is how ready you are, and the fact that a guru is necessary. These are the two important things. And as Sri Aurobindo has said that everybody needs a guru. And that is why even those who did not need a guru, to set the right example, have adopted a guru. Sri Aurobindo also adopted a guru, Sri Ramakrishna adopted a guru, Swami Vivekananda had a guru, even Lord Krishna had a guru. It's because of our we cannot straight away establish a communion with the impersonal divine, that we need a guru to give us someone with whom we can relate directly, and we need also someone who can preferably answer our questions and doubts of the type that we have. And so we need a guru for many things. But then again, Sri Aurobindo has said that a guru doesn't always have to be a living guru, because the guru has three important functions. One is the word, to give the right word. Now, that is possible also for the guru who is physically no more, through the words that he has already spoken. They are available to us, say in books and what that guru has written. But even more important than the word of the guru is the example of the guru. That is the example that he has set. Now that is also available to us even after the guru is physically no more, because the life that the guru lived is available to us, at least the surface life. And the third important thing that the guru contributes, which is even more important than the example, is the influence. Now that is something which is unspoken, which is the type of vibrations which the guru creates, the atmosphere that the guru creates. And that is also possible for the guru after the guru is physically no more, because the guru does stay in the atmosphere, and in fact the higher the spiritual evolution of the guru, the longer that influence, those vibrations will last. And to bring home this point, Sri Aurobindo has given the example of the avatars. Now avatars are the divine that have descended on earth and therefore have the highest level of consciousness. And that is why the influence of the avatars outlasts their physical presence on earth for thousands of years. Rama and Krishna are no more, but they continue to influence our lives even after thousands of years. That is because their influence can outlast their presence. And in fact, Sri Aurobindo said that is the purpose of the avatars, to renew that higher level of consciousness on earth again and again. Because one of the commonly cited verses of the Gita again is yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata, and so on. That every time the dharma declines, Lord appears on earth to restore dharma. But Sri Aurobindo says that is a very limited purpose. The avatar doesn't have to be there for that purpose. The divine doesn't have to descend on earth just to remove some evil like Ravan or Kans. For that it would be enough to send a Vibhuti, which is a great warrior. That would be quite adequate. The true purpose of the avatar is to provide a goalpost, an example of a level of consciousness, and to leave behind an influence which would persuade people, which would push people towards that standard. Go on reverberating. So that atmosphere that is created. So that atmosphere can outlast hundreds and thousands of years after the guru is physically no more. So every avatar is then appropriate to the age, appropriate to the... just 1 minute. That's how Sri Aurobindo and the mother, after they went to Pondicherry, they didn't move out even an inch from Pondicherry. But then today you find their influence all over the world. And influence, instead of waning, it seems to be increasing. Now, how is it that that is happening? And especially, Sri Aurobindo's relics now, they have traveled all over the world. And people suddenly feel that there's a change in the atmosphere when those relics are enshrined there. Now, that is because the vibrations are there even in those little remains in those relics which are enshrined. So that is how their influence can outlast their physical presence, and also it can travel widely. It doesn't remain confined to a place. When Sri Aurobindo was in Baroda, he adopted Guru Bhaskar Lele, I think, Vishnu Bhaskar Lele. He asked him for a limited purpose, that I want to learn yoga so that I can acquire the powers to get freedom for the country. So this guru gave him some instructions, after which Sri Aurobindo went into an inner silence and he reached a level of samadhi within 3 days, which people find it difficult to reach in a whole lifetime. And then some mantra was whispered to Sri Aurobindo, which he told the Guru. And then this Guru told him that now this is your mantra, whatever has been whispered to you, and you do not need any further instruction. But nominally he did adopt a Guru. Well, see, rituals are relatively superficial external features of religions. Once you go into spirituality, then you are going beyond religions. And therefore, the rituals really do not have a place in a spiritual life. They probably fulfill a certain need up to a point in human development. But in a true spiritual life, after a certain level of spiritual evolution, rituals become quite unnecessary. And in our tradition, by and large, you find that there are no rituals and ceremonies, because it's a spiritual sort of philosophy that we follow. It's not a new religion. Sri Aurobindo was very clear that he's not founding a new religion. What he has given us guidance for is a spiritual life. Okay, that is the last question then. Sri Aurobindo has said that there is no room for vital interchange in spiritual life. So how about married people? For this, I'll just give you a story, I think, which gives the answer. Once, if I may not remember the details right, but a story goes something like this. Once Radha had to feed Rishi Durvasa and his troops who were across the river. आपने सुनी हुई है क्या कहानी है? शायद आपने सुनी हुई है. No? The Rishi Durvasa and his troop were across the river, and Radha had to feed them. But then when she reached the river, she found that the river was in fury, and unless the river settled down, she could not cross. She could not go to the other side of the river. And I think she asked Lord Krishna himself, what should I do? And Lord Krishna said, go and say in front of the river, if Lord Krishna is celibate, settle down. And she did that, and the river settled down. So she walked. Now, then she went and fed Rishi Durvasa and his troop. They ate merrily, happily. And then again when she was coming back, the river was once again in fury. So now she asked Rishi Durvasa, what should I do? And he said, go and stand in front of the river and say, if Rishi Durvasa is eternally fasting, go down. And she did that, and the river again went down. Now what this illustrates is, now Rishi Durvasa had eaten his meal merrily in front of Radha. So he could not be eternally fasting. In the same way, Krishna had thousands of gopis. So normally we would say that that is not being celibate. But what this is trying to bring out is that one can be physically not keeping away from certain things and yet be internally totally detached. So Lord Krishna was internally detached, and he was just providing an opportunity to the gopis to express their devotion. And in the same way, Rishi Durvasa was eating, but he was not attached to the food. When he got it, he ate it. When he did not get it, he did not think about food. So, therefore, he was also eternally fasting. And therefore, when she said that in front of the river, it was truth that was spoken, and it was that power of that truth that brought down the river, the fury of the river. Okay. So I think this answers the question, I think.